make it so Stu's here from Wellington, New Zealand.
Okay. Morena. I'm easy.
Yeah.
I'm easy either way. You'll be a bit closer.
Gather round. So then when my team talking at the other end, they'll feel like they're down way by themselves. Darren, the thorn between two roses.
The two thorns next to
Stop this now to run it.
Right, morena koutou. I'll start with the karakia. Manawa mai te Māori nuku, manawa mai te Māori rangi, he manawa nui, he manawa tahi, he manawa ora e, he whakamaua kia tina, huie, taipuie. Thank you. Reminder that this meeting is live streamed, as is the practice these days. Welcome to Helena, our representative, first-time attendee, representative from Te Atiawaki Whakarongotai Charitable Trust. Welcome again. Also noting that we have a number of observers, Jessie Perini, Te Matarawa Maui, Nikki Riley from Horizons Regional Council, Scott Gilmore from Tararua District Council, Grant Smith, there you are, from Palmerston North City Council. Welcome all. Do we have, oh yes, we've got two absences, Mayor Bernie Wanden and I was going to say Mayor Helmut Modlik, but Chief Executive Helmut Modlik. Do I have a mover and a seconder for those? Darren Apanui, and I think Ken Laban was seconding that. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed? Those apologies are accepted. Right. Just moving into the paper. Got some minutes to confirm. The public minutes of the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee meeting on Tuesday the 17th of March 2026. Do I have a mover and a seconder for those? Darren Apanui, and a seconder in Mayor Baker came in first. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed? None? Okay, I'll come to that in a sec. Right, just going back one step, conflict of interest declarations. Anybody with those? Just looking online. No conflict of interest declarations. Moving on to the regional spatial plan preparation. Alan and Co. Do you want to step forward? And now you are a long way from us, but that's all right. Right. We have the paper in front of us, but can you take us through the salient parts of the paper, which contains a lot of information?
Good morning, committee. I'm here because I am responsible for the paper, although there were lots and lots of people input into this. This paper is to update the committee on the work that's been done so far on preparing for the regional spatial plan, and also to raise awareness on some matters that need to be dealt with immediately. I'll take the paper as read, but I also would like to introduce Nick Etheridge from Porirua City Council, and I'll hand the mic over to her.
Tēnā koutou rau, rangatira mā, ko Nick Etheridge ahau. My day job is General Manager Policy Planning and Regulatory at Porirua City. I'm sitting in front of you in my capacity as the project sponsor for the Regional Spatial Plan, which was agreed amongst the senior managers to have representation that's shared, responsibility that's shared across the different areas for our regional projects. So we've attempted to follow on from the papers that you've had already from Helmut and Darren to segue into how we can start implementing and mobilising an approach to implementing the regional spatial plan and identifying how it intersects with the Simplifying Local Government Head Start programme of work. So I hope this paper brings forward some good conversation around how you would support us moving forward on that. Kia ora.
Okay, so papers taken as read. Just a number of questions from me. Just to underline the difference between the regional spatial plan that's coming at us and the FDS. What are the so we've quite a number of members of this committee have been through the FDS process, a much lighter process in the overall scheme of things. Can you mark out the differences between that process and what this will and this process that we're about to embark on?
I'll take that one. So this process is a mandatory process, which is very different than the future development strategy. It's not enacted yet, but it will have royal assent and be enacted in legislation. That makes a really big difference in terms of the decision making that follows. Secondly, through the regional spatial plan, which is fed from the planning bill, we have what's called a spatial planning committee, and that committee sets up the revised structure to enact a regional spatial plan. And it's in the committee process that those decision-making options, governance, tangata whenua involvement, local voice all gets played out, and it's legislated. There are detailed guidelines around how and when we must follow that, which is very different to the future development strategy.
Okay, second question from me as we move to form the new committee in time. Of course, the paper says we have to wait for the legislation, as there may be changes through the second reading process. How do we fit in some of the treaty obligations that we already have that are unique to this region when we're thinking about the governance for the committee? And is that relevant at all if we just lift and shift this committee into the new framework?
There are a couple of ways we can approach it. There's a bit of flexibility in that system, and conversations have already started taking place with some tangata whenua. We think there's more conversation to go around how we go about that and what it would look like. So you could do something as simple as lifting and shifting what you have, but we could go further and explore more and bring a revision back in a couple of ways, which we think if we started that conversation now, and that helped prepare us to get ready for the time when we do know how the bill finally lands, there's more voices that need to be in that mix to consider and bring it back to this committee. So there are some options over and above what you've got today that we think we could explore further using the legislation. I guess the short answer is we have got some agreements already that can be put and inserted into this planning committee. And I guess we'd like to have a richer conversation about how we do that.
Final question from me is, start to finish, what is the legislation signalling as the time frame to sign off on the regional spatial plan?
The legislation at the moment says that from royal assent to the plan being notified, it's a 15-month process. And then I think, is it 6 months from there to have it signed off? So 23 months.
Signed off by the government, you mean?
So the sign-off process is this. Every council has to sign off this regional spatial plan. Yep, every single council has to sign it off, has to agree it. And iwi, yeah, every partner.
And so inevitably, what happens if that doesn't happen? Alan, is there some sort of mediation process, or does somebody make a final decision?
According to the legislation, now I'm a bit, it might be a bit fuzzy here, but I think that the legislation says that the minister can decide if we can't come to a decision. But there's actually no penalty for not meeting the time frame, as far as we can tell. Just like, I mean, we've had this debate at officer level a few times about what happens if we don't meet the legislation, and everyone agrees that there doesn't seem to be any penalty except for loss of reputation.
Can I add to that through the chair, please? So we're starting with an assumption that under the future development strategy, all councils would be in and tangata whenua as we currently stand. We'd consider whether there's other players that need to have their voice in that space. So that's the starting assumption. The timing with Head Start is something that we're working with that group, and there are some tensions in that timing space. But the legislation says that there's an expectation that we start on the basis of the current regional makeup, and that all that regional makeup needs to sign off the start point. We go through a hearings process at the back end, and that same configuration is also required to sign off based on recommendations from a hearings committee. So that's the start and end. If in the journey through Head Start you're forming a sub-region or something else involved, that can be incorporated into the regional spatial plan boundary. So there is space in the legislation to cater for what might change throughout the journey and where the sub-regions do evolve. If that helps answer your question.
Thank you. Further questions? Maisie.
Thank you, and apologies for lateness. So just further on that, the recommendation has a note, the connection between the local government reform Head Start program work and the regional spatial plan. My sort of deep dive into this is that it's not entirely clear yet in terms of the relationship between the two, and in the Head Start documentation that highlights both the opportunity and the risk in terms of the implementation of the planning reforms, the swift implementation of the planning reforms. So I'm curious about the process agreement and what you were just talking about in relationship of the processes happening in parallel. Do you see any, I guess, risks of beginning the RMA reforms in this process? Is there a delivery risk in then the Head Start proposal being implemented at the same time?
There are a lot of risks, as you quite rightly point out. The biggest risk is that one of the entities doesn't sign up, either to the regional spatial plan element. I think that's a bigger risk in terms of the regional spatial plan than the Head Start. As you would have read in the guidance, the Head Start almost preempts that different configurations of boundaries might exist. And there are sections in the Act that create pathways through that. From a regional spatial planning project perspective, the risk of not having signatories to start all aligned in the region would delay the project quite significantly. I'd also add that resourcing of tangata whenua and council staff is also a risk. If we haven't got all those voices at the table, able to commit that time to make sure that we don't just add tasks into a strategy, into a spatial plan, but we actually think strategically for the region, we really need to have that as the basis. And so that also requires support and commitment from all those entities to be able to think regionally and strategically in order to cater for the other elements in the regional spatial plan that don't exist in the future development strategy. So I see those as the biggest risks. There are others, but they're the fundamental ones that could really delay.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Holbrook.
Yeah, thank you for the work that's gone into this and for the workshop that was held that I was part of. A really incredible start on this work, I think. So I'm just looking at the document that you sent through, Darren, and it talks about the stronger alignment between regional direction and local aspirations. And I think that speaks to the risk that we just outlined about entities potentially not signing up to the process. So just turning my mind to not what are the outcome risks, but how to mitigate those risks ahead of time, and thinking that key to that is going to be early conversations with councils and local communities, but especially councils, and just wondering if maybe zone 4 might be a good way to initiate like a wider conversation with elected members. I know that traditionally those meetings haven't been well attended, but something concrete like this and a real push might be a way to bring those wider elected members into the discussion. And also just wanting to know a little bit about how individual councils will be involved at an early stage, because that's something that fell over a little bit through the FDS.
We've taken a lot of learnings from the FDS, and obviously you've all given feedback around what hasn't worked and has worked. Subject to your guidance and approval today, we have some thoughts around how we can spend time with individual TAs first to really understand what matters for them, what success looks like for them, and how they would like to operate, what they can contribute to. So starting with more individually based conversations and then getting feedback around what is a revised structural way that from senior officers up can contribute to forums like this more effectively. So it will be targeting individual places first, then having a collective workshop, and then feeding into you. We are open to how you would like us to operate, and if there's another way that works, we're open to that at the moment, which is why we're encouraging the early thinking. That answers your question, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Sorry.
Could I add to that, please, through you, Chair, that all of the agreement on how we work, how the partners work together on this will be captured in the process agreement, which we've outlined in the report. So we feel that we need to start work quite early on the engagement, awareness raising, and bringing everyone along on the journey, so that we get some alignment on how we want to work together, some agreement on issues and opportunities we want to address, both locally and at a regional level, and then have this all documented in the paper early on so that we avoid a dispute later on. So that document early on is quite important. This is why I think, Mayor Holbrook, you raised such a great question there, because we need to agree early on how we work together.
And I'll just add, the process agreement gives us form, it gives us context, but there's a couple of elements in it that aren't as good as the FDS. And one of those is the tangata whenua voice and the way they're focusing on settled iwi. So we think we can still take good practice from some of our FDS elements and insert it in, despite what the legislation is guiding. So,
Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely.
To test.
I think it's really great to have those lessons that we've learned from the FDS. So, yeah, no, thanks for your answers. That's really great. Thanks.
Thanks, Jenna. Yeah, to test with the table in due course, but I can't see that we would be generally in agreement with making a distinction between settled and unsettled. That just seems manifestly wrong. Anyway, Mayor Smith, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Kia ora, everyone. Thanks, Chair Darren, and thank you for the invite as an observer. And I'm just unsure whether I'm allowed to ask a question, but I think with your permission, if I may. I think in the spirit of working together in this Lower North Island context, and I think it relates to the spatial plan or spatial plans paper, and more aimed at the officers. Are they going to check in with up the island with around the horizons, Manawatu Wanganui regional spatial plan? Because the transport connections will be even more solid. The development, the iwi relationships, partnerships are all sort of linked as well. So is there going to be an officer check-in at some stage, even if it's just a a Zoom call between senior officers to check in?
Yes, thank you for the question, and yes, we will be. So obviously, we're in more detailed conversations with Hora Whenua. We think about the spatial planning purpose and in the context of transport, and Palmerston North does have a part to play in terms of the transport network related to the Wellington area, along with a couple of other key attributes that we're having to think about from the regional spatial plan perspective. So yes, we will be having conversations with as far as Palmerston North, because there is a network, there is a system that works around that lower North Island. So yes.
Okay, and just Chair Darren, just one more. Also, Palmy's FDS, we've got quite a big distribution and logistics sort of sector to that, which really does include Wellington and the greater Wellington area, and that sort of could be dovetailed. Those conversations should be dovetailed into that meeting as well.
Cool. Thanks, Mayor Smith. I think
Thank you.
what that last point sort of reminds me of is that the recent meetings that were well attended and had good discussion at a territorial authority level are now things that we're going to have to move out into other sector groups. So the logistics community, for example, the horizontal network community, gas, power, public transport, they're all groups that we're going to have to engage with on a more intimate basis, and many more besides those two. Darren, Apanui.
Ko te mea tuatahi ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. Ko tai mai nei ki mana ki te karama o te rā no reira tēnā no tātou. Kia ora kōrua. I'm just checking, going back on a comment that you made about the potential of the drafting of the plan to be delayed. So on page 28, that's been provided, which gives two pathways of delivery. One's a blue line, which is the statutory alignment, and the pink line, which is the extension. So I'm just wanting to check, are you talking about a delay outside the pink line?
Yes, we are. But I'd have to say that these are all just estimates. We haven't landed on anything specific yet. So don't be alarmed at the timeline. They're just indicative. Yep.
So what it does say is that the plan will be adopted by about March 2028. Are you saying that we may be beyond that?
Well, it would depend on the amount of work, amount of consultation that, or even the gaps in data that we might have to actually do a spatial plan regionally, because there may be different levels of data that each different TA or iwi hold, or even infrastructure provider, to feed into a regional spatial plan. So at a governance level, it would be up to the governance as to what level is good enough for a plan. So if at the governance level, if this body thought that we could a kind of a plan that had a few gaps was all right, we would need shorter. And if you didn't think you needed to go back to your communities for lots of consultation and get feedback, we may need shorter. But if you decided that you needed more, it may take longer. And that's the basis on this kind of projection of how long we might take.
So, good question, Darren. Just on that then, Alan, one of the key distinctions clearly between this process and the FDS process is that this process bites down on the natural environment plan and the land use plan. So can we really afford any slippage if the preparation of those plans is relying on some guidance and direction, not to say that the LTPs that we prepare also require us to really have settled this?
Can it afford any slippage? At this stage, it's actually really, really difficult to at this stage before the bill is enacted to understand all the specific steps that, like all the specifics that might need to be included in a spatial plan. But I would say that the reason why we brought this to the committee's attention at the last quarter, and why we brought it to the senior manager's attention earlier in the year, was because we felt that we needed to move quickly, and there's a lot of work we could do even before the bill's enacted. So without being able to answer your question directly about whether or not we can afford slippage, I'm a professional project manager and I like to be really, really organized. So I like to be ahead of schedule, no matter what the schedule is. So that's why we've one of our recommendations is to seek agreement that we can carry on working on this.
Can I perhaps add a comment from a project sponsor perspective, which is we intend to meet the statutory deadlines that get landed in the official, once the bill's enacted. If for quality reasons or for very genuine socialisation reasons we need to spend a bit more time on something that still fits within the end of 2028 timeframe, we would come back and seek approval to do that or not. But our goal is to try and stay as close to the targeted timeframes as we can, so that if an amalgamated entity does form, it's got a substantive and good quality regional spatial plan to work from. Unlike Auckland that built it after, obviously we're being required to build it before, we want it to be of sufficient quality that you don't need to undo it or have the gaps in it from the time you started, if that were to play out. So we're kind of working on that principle, to have it solid enough that you don't have to spend a lot of time in that space, because there'll be a lot of other things to be forming underneath it. But we don't want to do that at the cost of quality or having questions and big gaps. That's not what we would consider success. We'll have a more detailed conversation with you about that, but that's our start point. But we just still got to wait a bit for that landing of the definitive dates. Hope that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'm just referring to page 30, the resourcing considerations. I've just come from a meeting with the new CE of MCERT, Jeremy Lightfoot, to talk through some of my concerns around integration of land use, transport, etc., and some examples for him. And one of the things that I'd like to see in this resource consideration is in urban economics, because one of the failings, I believe, of the FDS was that the economics were focused on from a development side and not from a broader economics in terms of the council infrastructure costs and also to the society. So I'd be quite keen to see that included.
I guess one of the differences about this to the FDS is that LTPs have got to be able to show they can deliver on it, which is quite a big difference. And we do have information gaps in, for example, in terms of the capacity of the Three Waters network. So we don't yet have information about that. As was quite rightly pointed out, we haven't had Wellington electricity in the room or Waka Kotahi in the room in quite the same way. So there is a connection to LTPs must be able to show a deliverability and that wider economic benefit that gives certainty to all sectors, not just the development sector.
And can I encourage you to have good, robust early engagement with MCERT as well as the Infrastructure Commission, because they're doing some excellent work that we can learn from, and also not to use the research that's been done already, including by commissioned by Greater Wellington on the costs of development. Thank you.
Cool. Final questions, people? Any questions online? Mayor Bex Johnson.
Thanks, Darren. Thought I'd get in quick. It was either me or Steve. Just a question. Is the configuration of the Wellington Leadership Committee likely to change, for example, if Wairarapa was a unitary authority by itself, or, as an example, Kapiti went north to Horowhenua?
There are pathways within the legislation to cater for those configurations. So it doesn't, as long as they can feed into the regional spatial plan, whether it be as a sub-regional or a separate entity, if that gets approved by central government, that can still sit under the umbrella of a wider regional spatial plan. So it's not a barrier from a spatial
Okay, because that also lends to that earlier question that Perry asked about Head Start versus spatial plan type thing. You know, if you've got a team together and they're all signing, and then that essentially structure of that changes, that's kind of what I'm aiming at.
Yeah, so from the get-go, the big impediment is if you don't have everybody within the current Wellington regional boundaries sign up. That presents an issue for the regional spatial plan. If we start and you carry on through the journey and you form a sub-region, provided that sub-region gives input into the wider regional spatial plan, that's okay. The regional spatial plan can cater for that. You're essentially identified as a sub-region. What we haven't confirmed is whether we take a catchment-based approach, whether we take a metro-rural approach. So we've still got that thinking to do, and different approaches impact the configuration. So we're working with the Head Start team around what really would be hard, like what things would be difficult, what would impact that spatial plan, and what the legislation or what the pathways can cater for. So it's messy, but there are
Isn't everything? Okay, thanks.
Cool. Yep. Darren Uppany.
And just going back to your question about treaty principles being enacted within the plan, and I don't know whether it was a request, but you saw an opportunity for Te Tirohanga Whakamua to be lifted up from the FDS and put into the spatial plan. Speaking on behalf of one of the people that were in that, I think that's the reason why we developed it the way we did, so it could be actually uplifted and placed within any plan within this region. So you have our tūtuku. Kia ora.
Okay. Any more final questions? No, thank you. Do I have a mover and a seconder for this paper? You'll see the recommendations on page 16 and 17, 5 recommendations. Z and Darren Uppanui, moved and seconded. Do either of you wish to speak to the paper? Anybody else? All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed? None. That seems to be unanimous. Thank you. Thanks, Ellie and Alan. Right. Good job. Moving on. And just to signal, there is an opportunity at the end just to have a quick reflection on the exercise that many of you have just been part of those sort of smaller local area, I suppose they were workshops in a way, or discussions, and there are some notes from those that have been circulated to you. So we'll just move through this paper and then we'll just turn over to that subject matter. So the next item, which is for information, is the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee Secretariat Report for June. Morena.
Morena koutou, ko Eli Taki Tokoingoa, I'm the Program Advisors for the WRLC Secretariat. So I'll take the report as read. It's our standard quarterly report on the program of work. Nothing has changed since it was written. I'll note sort of 2 main points. A key highlight is having Helena here from Te Atiawa Ki Whakarongotai Charitable Trust. It's fantastic to have you in the tent. And secondly, based on the discussion you've just had, recognising that the WRLC program is sort of shifting in a natural way from an implementation of the FDS sort of phase to a developmental phase, moving into the RSP. And this is a sort of cyclic shift that the program's seen over the years. This next development phase, we expect that it will require deeper collaboration, greater clarity on mandate, resourcing and partner participation, and that would essentially help strengthen co-development and timely decision making. That's all sort of been covered in the previous paper. Other than that, any questions?
Okay, thanks, Ellie. Any questions on this paper? No? No questions? Thank you. Oh, Darren Uppernoot. Too soon.
So, kia ora, Ali. Thank you for the paper. I'm just checking out on page 41. It's talking about the Regional Economic Development Plan. And there's a comment that's been made, and I just need some clarification. And it says, water resilience modelling, identifying a potential 3,800 jobs in Wairarapa. Could that be explained a little bit more, if possible?
Too many.
I thought I was off the hook there, Darren.
Stu?
But
Maybe
Stu's got someone.
Can you hear me? Kia ora. Kia ora, Darren. Yes, as part of the Wairarapa Water Resilience Governance Group that Nigel might want to chip in on this, a piece of work was commissioned around the case for action. That has now been completed, and the opportunity for water resilience in the Wairarapa is estimated at $1.5 billion and 3,800 jobs. So that piece of work's been done. There's still question marks over what next and the appetite to do implementation in that space, given the Head Start work and local government reforms. So I'll probably ask Nigel for his thoughts on where that's heading as well.
Thanks, Stu. Yeah, that's an excellent characterisation of where it's at. The resource that we had in play for this work, which was Jenny Marks, she had been funded by the 3 Wairarapa councils and GW. That contract has just expired, and we just need to make a decision as to whether or not we look to extend some form of work to keep, particularly I think, the cohesion amongst the councils, but probably more so working with Stu and the team as to how we keep an interface with the government and the central government funding agencies, because if anything is to ever happen in the Wairarapa, it is absolutely going to need a strong alignment with the central government as well as whatever form local government looks like. So we need to figure out what that looks like, and we need to figure out what sort of resource might be required for that, and whether it's an external one or we can somehow in-house that between the four councils. In the absence of that, it does run the risk of stalling.
Certainly, just in response to that, Darren, one of the things that, certainly from a regional council perspective, that we are keen to start discussions on is how we streamline and simplify the consenting process for localised water retention and storage. Rather than thinking about the big bang projects, think about how we can get things in at a local level, nature-based type solutions, stuff that is much more localised than we have been thinking about just at times in the Wairarapa. Any further questions, folks? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Kelly. If there's no other questions on that, then the last order of business, though it's not on the agenda, is the summary of the key themes from the discussions that we had. So those discussions were, I think Janet's mentioned them already, a discussion with Hora Whenua and Kapiti District Council, Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai and Ngā Hapu o Raukawa. That was first cab off the rank. Then we had a discussion with Ngāti Toa, Taranaki Whānui, Porirua and Wellington City, and then we moved a little bit further north to the Hutt Valley, again with Te Atiawa and with Ngāti Toa, and then over for a separate meeting in the Wairarapa with Ngāti Kahungunu Rangatane and the 3 local authorities. All of them raised different issues, but also a degree of similarity across those issues, unprompted. You all talked about really needing your communities needing to see themselves in a regional spatial plan, that if that didn't happen, then we will have lost the voice of those communities and the confidence of those communities. At the same time, you talked about building up a regional spatial plan from a local level. So use your local realities as the building blocks for a regional spatial plan, rather than coming in over the top with a regional lens and trying to impose that on the districts. And I think if I pick up a sort of final common theme, you had all been up for the challenge. Some of you clearly wanted to move faster than others, but you were all up for the challenge of actually working across communities to ensure a polished product as much as we can do within the 15-month time frame that we've likely to have imposed upon us. So I wonder whether you have any reflections of other matters that you had seen coming from that exercise, or anything that you want to put in. This is a pretty free conversation at this stage. Di, you're online.
Oh, kia ora. Just adding to that korero that we need to add Horowhenua and Mua Upoko to that. We weren't able to attend the last workshop, but we've been involved since 2018.
Yep.
So that needs to be added in.
Good,
Thanks.
good reminder, Di. So we can do that for the next round that we undertake. That certainly wasn't the first time. There'll be many of these. You'll get sick of them after a while. Mayor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. I just wanted to, on page 2 of the summary, you've captured some opportunities raised, but ones that were very prevalent in the Wairarapa meeting was water resilience, transport network, and the Remataka Road. I think they just need to be on the radar.
Okay.
Because as we've just discussed with that last report, we won't achieve water resilience without central government funding. Thank you.
Cool. Any other issues, folks? No. So they were the first really attempt to sort of generate conversations that we sort of have had difficulty having today when we get all in a room and you're all confronted with having to think on a regional level. I thought they were really useful, and I think many of you had sort of conveyed that to us as well. We will be rerunning those types of exercises and getting to finer level of detail as we go. And as I think has already been indicated, we will be branching out as well. So we've started with iwi and territorial authorities and the regional council, but we will go to networks, we will go to communities, etc. And there will be many opportunities over time for individuals and organisations to engage. Any final thoughts, questions on that? Otherwise, that'll bring us to an end to this meeting. I will close this with a karakia. Kia tau te rangimari, ki runga, ki raro, ki roto, ki waho, aio ki te aorangi, kia whakamaua, kia tina, tina, huie, taikie. Thanks everybody for your attendance this morning. Quick and sharp meeting. Thanks. Cheers.